Attention, your paradigm is about to shift at the intersection of fact and reason. You're entering Kingston Country.
I'm Dan Kingston, and you're listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast.
Part of what Congress appropriated had language attached to it that required that the administration make sure that Ukraine's rooting out corruption, because there were elections during that same period you just mentioned. And Zelensky got elected on a platform of rooting out corruption, which we're glad about, but nobody really knew if that was what he was going to follow through on because of Ukraine's history of corruption. The law required that before any taxpayer money go to Ukraine, the president had to ensure that they're rooting out corruption, which ultimately they did.
That's Steve Scalise on Fox News Sunday explaining about corruption, how the president was simply doing his job, the Congress-mandated job that he was required to do, of weeding out the corruption before agreeing to these arms sales. We have testimony, remember, from George P. Kent, a State Department official, who said there was concern in the State Department over Hunter Biden's role being, on the board of Burisma, this energy company based in Ukraine that had a history of corruption. The State Department was worried about the conflict of interest, how that would look, given the Hunter Biden's dad was vice president of the time of the United States. You do have an argument for the perfect phone call. You can just say, well, the president was doing his job on corruption here. The problem is that there is no other talk of corruption besides the Hunter Biden Burisma board scandal. While that is corrupt, while we have State Department now, last week, saying that Burisma was it did have a history of corruption and there was a conflict of interest, you'd have to imagine that if there were other cases of corruption that Trump was asking Zelensky to look into, that we would have those transcripts released too, right? Because that would make the president look good and it would help back up this claim that it was all based on corruption. So, but I do like what Steve Scalise said here, because the Burisma was a history of corruption, had a history of corruption, right? And so it makes sense why Trump would look there. I think Steve Scalise has to get brownie points for making the most clear case of the phone call being perfect, while the president it's looked like given permission to some Republicans and rhinos and swing districts to admit that it might not have been a perfect phone call, just not an impeachable offense. What does Dan Kingston think? I ran a poll, and, Dan Kingston, I'm curious what you think, honestly. And it seems to me you believe that the president did nothing wrong. At least you are saying that in the poll that I ran on Twitter, and that seems to be the MAGA position, and Trump is clearly asking for you to say that it's a perfect phone call and that nothing's wrong. I think ultimately it's a good strategy. What he's saying to his base is don't give an inch. This is perfect. You know it's perfect. I know it's perfect. While giving permission to Republicans to say, maybe it wasn't 100% perfect. We all know it's not 100% perfect, okay? If you're one of these people and you haven't been following it, let's say you have been following it or you haven't been following it, I don't know, but the truth is it's boring as hell and you probably are tired of it. The stuff looks bad, but it's Washington, D.C., it's politics. Half the stuff's going on we can't even know about. You think all of this backdoor State Department stuff is being aired out in the open? You think Trump can tell us the whole story? Or you think there's other stuff going on, other classified top secret stuff that we don't have any privilege to know about? And that complicates the whole thing, because the Democrats can use that to their advantage, knowing there's certain things that can't be discussed and knowing that this makes the president look bad. Again, it only makes the president look bad with people that already didn't like the president. This is not going to change minds. Everybody's talking about Sondland, Ambassador Sondland to the EU, how that's going to be a big event on Wednesday. That's in the future from when I'm recording this. Sondland will talk and testify. My prediction is that Sondland equals Mueller. Boring, all hype. Remember, Sondland was a president's ally through this whole thing. If anything, he'll plead the fifth. Of course, that'll be front page news. Oh, Sondland plead the fifth. The president must be guilty. The president's a felon because Sondland plead the fifth. No, that's not what that means. It just means that he wants to take a constitutional protection and not to incriminate himself. That's all that means, and that's likely what Sondland will do. If he doesn't, if he just, talks, he will make a defense for the president. He's not going to stab the president in the back. Sondland's not. And at the worst of it, it might just confirm some of what we've already heard in prior testimony, which, what's the news there? I mean, how many times can they repeat the same goddamn headline again and again and again? And you have, all these people sitting there with the popcorns, what I talk about. Now even Chuck Todd on his stupid Sunday show even said, get out the popcorn for Sunday. I'm telling you, these people are sick. They treat it like the Super Bowl with their popcorn. And I'm not going to talk about impeachment every day. You think this excites me? I mean, it's interesting. Don't get me wrong. It's interesting how it's being spun in both directions and what's really going on with the deep state and the military industrial complex. They want their wars. They want their endless wars. Trump has been standing in their way. So it's interesting to see how they try to grab control from a duly elected president of the United States, what this means for the future of the presidency, for the office of the presidency in this country. But again, what am I going to talk about it over and over and over again? It's something that the American people are sick of. They're already tired of it. They're bored of it. Yeah, you heard the Democrats did the focus groups on quid pro quo. Didn't pass the focus groups. That's why they changed it to extortion and bribery. They're just trying to figure out what sticks. Everybody understands what's going on in Washington, D.C., that it's a corrupt, ugly system. It's a mess. Trump went in there to clean the swamp. So we have no illusion about how swampy it is, and you can't clean up the swamp without getting some swamp water on yourself, right? How are you going to clean up the swamp and stay perfectly clean? You imagine a guy in like a business suit and a tie and, $200 shoes or this kind of thing. I mean, what am I talking about? $2,000 shoes. And he's walking in and he's perfectly clean. And he says, yeah, I cleaned up the swamp. And he's not a swamp water bit drop on him. I'm not buying that. The person that cleans up the swamp is going to be the swamp monster of them all. It's going to be the swamp monster that cleans up the swamp. I mean, let's face it. So you have an imperfect messenger in Trump. You have a swamp monster. He's getting in the trenches and he's cleaning up the trash. And he's getting dirty as a part of it. And the Democrats and deep state, they're using that against him to say, look, this president is a Nazi. We've heard that one before, right? So I think Sondland's going to be a zero. He's going to be like Mueller. It's not going to end up the way Democrats are hoping. And what's going to happen next? Well, here's Marie Harf backing up a claim I've been saying again and again on this podcast.
It was bad, but it's not worth removing him before an election.
John Bolton is really the key, I think, because he is someone that conservative Republicans and the base trusts. And if he testifies and what he says,
but he's not going to testify because the Democrats aren't going to wait for him.
He may. We'll see.
First of all, Republicans and conservatives, the base, do not trust John Bolton by any stretch. The courts are going to conveniently call up Bolton to testify, to be the reluctant hero of the resistance. He's going to add a false sense of bipartisanship, just enough for the liars in the mainstream media to tell you that this is bipartisan, to tell you, oh, Bolton is revealing the secrets. Here we go. Now Republicans have to convict. No, because Bolton is a neo-libcon warmonger. He works with the deep state. The deep state's owned by the military-industrial complex. Who knows what kind of military fat cat contracts Bolton gets for his participation in orchestrating the goddamn axis of evil that's responsible for why we have hundreds of thousands of troops across the Middle East today. Yeah, despite what you heard about Syria, we still have the troops all over the place. They will stop at nothing to get their coveted war with Iran. If that means taking down a president, aligning with the Democrats, that's what they'll do. That's what they'll do, and that's what they'll get. And you have AOC, you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying that the Democrats should go back to FDR and become the party of peace and prosperity. And she doesn't even understand that FDR was the closest thing to a dictator that we ever had, which is exactly what AOC wants to be. She doesn't know facts or logic or reason. She doesn't need any of that because she has this charisma. Yes, it's a charisma. It's a charisma the far left cultists would follow off a glacier. They just follow her right off a glacier because she's sitting there and she's screaming, and it doesn't matter. The facts don't matter. The facts don't matter to anybody anymore. It's just a zero-sum game. It's what politics has become, zero-sum on the right and the left. And there's basically zero room for any kind of independent analysis to say what's going on. It's either perfect or it's the devil. And there's no room for anything in between. So why am I even here? Why am I even attempting to slice through the noise and give you the music? Look, I could go on the radio. I've been recruited by local stations. You know, they like my stuff. They like what I've done. I would be beholden to them. The commercials, the advertisements, the segment breaks, the commercial breaks. There's not enough money they could pay me to do that stuff. I'm not doing this for the money. You have to understand, this is our First Amendment right to speak and to be heard, and that's what I'm doing to you. Not everybody has a microphone. Not everybody has the ability to express the anger and the outrage in their hearts, and I am. I'm able to do it, not perfectly. No, this isn't a perfect phone call. No, but I'm doing my best. With your help, we will continue to do better. And I'm not going to sign on to some system that says you have to do it our way or the highway. This is too important for that. I will be beholden to nobody. You are who I'm beholden to. You are the person that I count on. And hopefully you count on me. That's how I treat this. Not for the money. I feel like I have a fiduciary value to you, my listener. And let me tell you, something's working. I mean, you are helping. You've done an amazing job, and I have to thank you because I'm the envy of the podcast world, at least for podcasts that are starting out. People are messaging me, how have you grown this fast? How do you have this quality of a message in this early of a podcast? Because you are saying the things that I'm feeling. And you're saying what I'm trying to say, but I just can't put it into words. And how are you getting the listeners, the subscribers? How are you growing so fast? And you know what? The answer is because of you. Together, we're going to bring this message, this neo-libcon message. We have to end these endless wars. We have to protect the president because he's protecting us. He's protecting us. We have his back so that he can have the country's back.
Kingston Country. You've been listening to the Dan Kingston Podcast.